You cannot recall a new form of life. Erwin Chargaff, 1972. What do you mean you can't recall a new form of life? And who the heck is Erwin Chargaff? Michael Crichton offered 2 epigraphs to help contextualize the novel he was about to unleash on us back in 1990, and in the pilot episode of the Jurassic Park-Cast, I took some time to dig them up and review how they frame our consumption of his best-selling novel, Jurassic Park. Here's an excerpt from that episode discussing the memorable quote, "You cannot recall a new form of life," by Erwin Chargaff. Let me know what you think.
And the second epigraph is a little bit more simple. It says, "You cannot recall a new form of life." It's by Erwin Chargaff, and it's from 200 years later, 1972. Erwin Chargaff was a biochemist and a DNA researcher who says this quote while publishing specifically on nucleic acids. I think my research says, but I don't know if that's true or not. Chargaff's quote, used by Crichton, comes from a letter to the editor of Science, where he says in its entirety, quote, "You can stop splitting the atom. You can stop visiting the moon. You may even decide not to kill entire populations by the use of a few bombs. But you cannot recall a new form of life." This is a geneticist warning against pursuing genetic modifications and generating genetic mutations because life is unpredictable and potentially catastrophic. While it's argued that eradicating human disease is undeniably good, in the context of generating unpredictable mutations in the service of eradicating human disease, one risks catastrophe. Is he really warning against catastrophe in this quote? The analogous examples he suggests that you can control include splitting an atom, which may result in a nuclear explosion, visiting the moon, which they did. They visited in 1969 and tried again in 1970 with Apollo 13, which went catastrophically wrong. "Houston, we have a problem." And then they stopped. See, you can stop landing on the moon. If it's too dangerous, you can just stop. 1972, so 72, 69, 70. Yeah, 1972. He's likely referring to these specific scientific risky pursuits. Landing on the moon wasn't easy. And finally, and somewhat bitterly it sounds, he says, if mankind weren't too jaded and divisive, we could even choose to stop dropping atom bombs on each other. So he's kind of got a dark perspective there. But these are 3 examples of scientific pursuit that have mortal, catastrophic consequences, he argues, that can be stopped by an act of will at any time. However, his warning is that you cannot recall a new form of life. No act of will can stop life, even in the face of catastrophe. Mutations to everything from as small as viruses and bacteria on up are consequentially risky because they are alive. What is the meaning of life? It's to survive and propagate the species. Life does this at all costs or faces extinction, and life doesn't choose extinction. Malcolm has a quote later on. Dr. Ian Malcolm from the book, of course, has a quote later on about life finding a way, and I think we could easily argue that Malcolm is a student of Chargaff's school of thought, or certainly that Crichton was likely channeling Chargaff in his writing of Malcolm. But we'll see. Maybe we'll argue that later. Simply put, this quote is akin to a very common expression or trope that we're familiar with. You know, letting the cat out of the bag, or opening Pandora's box, or conversely trying to put toothpaste back in the tube. These are all tropes on the same warning, that if the risks don't outweigh the benefits, it's best not to do it. With Chargaff talking about cloning dinosaurs? Yeah, I think no, he wasn't, but it's no surprise that Crichton was well read in scientific doomsayers prophesying end times as a consequence of science and technology gone awry. That seems to be Crichton's wheelhouse, right?